Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's 2-Minute Warning feature interview, where we take a deeper dive into this massive, urgent push that we're seeing amongst the energy sector towards decarbonization, hoping to try and get some intelligence and insights that will help stakeholders here in the Middle East as well as internationally, navigate somewhat of a bumpy path ahead in the transition. It's 2 minutes to midnight. I'm joined here today with our special guest speaker, Rasso Bartenschlager, General Manager of Al Masaood Power Division. Thank you for joining the show.
Thanks, Brian, for having me.
I just kind of wanted to kick off, I know it's in the rearview mirror, but COP26 had ended. It seemed that, a big call to action was made, moving essentially from visions and let's say higher level initiatives to actually implementation in terms of strategies, roadmaps, blueprints for the year ahead. From your perspective, what you're seeing across the energy sector, the power segment, are you now starting to see those tangible actions be put into place and accelerated towards decarbonization?
Yeah. First of all, again, thank you for having me. And I think it's a very, very, I would say, important topic in the moment. As well, it's also a very interesting topic because it's something which is not talked about every day. Everybody talks about COP26, but what is really happening, right? Being here in the Middle East, I can tell you that the COP26 was only the start of a mini revolution. Everybody now talks about COP27 in Egypt and COP28 in the UAE next year. So what I can see now, at least from the perspective where I am from, we can see many projects where, let's say, 5 years, 10 years ago, it was talked on a very high level about the future, the strategy of countries, of the world, whatsoever. Where we are today, we are talking about physical nuts and bolts, bricks and stones, moving, and projects are getting implemented, completed, partially completed, or on the way to start, right? So COP26, obviously here the technologies which have been as a kind of studies, prototypes, whatsoever, implemented or shown, was some of them in the early stage. However, some of them already existing since quite some time. However, today in a more or less commercial availability, so it makes sense commercially. Now end users are talking about sustainable energy, talking about sustainability of business models, which years ago we didn't talk about. We talk, what is a country doing? Wait, what the industry comes up with. It's really fast. It's really fast. I mean, yeah. Please.
On that technology side, one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is the scaling up of technology. Are you starting to see that aspect essentially improve at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, here the Middle East, and if you talk about in particular UAE or Saudi Arabia, solar is a big part of this transition of sustainable energy. I mean, we cannot fool ourselves by looking at other things in the moment. Solar is one of the big ones. And there are many projects here in the UAE. There is NEOM in Saudi Arabia. Solar is a part of it. That's fact. When we talk about technologies, there are many technologies out there and they're talked about it. You talk about electrolyzers, fuel cells, whatsoever. They are not new to the industry. However, what is new today is that people bring them together for certain applications, where some industry were working on hydrogen, medical, some pharmacy, pharmaceutical, whatever industries. Today, hydrogen, we as a company talk about hydrogen as a fuel for a vessel operating in Abu Dhabi, right? So it's a commercialized application, it's a commercialized use. And I think this has changed in COP when all these big companies showed something and the normal person could actually see the connection between what is this thing doing, how is it helping me with sustainable energy. And I think the technologies are there. I don't think so that's a question anymore. It's just finding the right technology for the right fit and purpose. And then it's more or less a chicken or egg situation. If you produce more of hydrogen as example, or solar power, and we see solar as a very good example. Solar was expensive years ago. Today, it's the cheapest source of energy production. The same is happening to hydrogen right now. Hydrogen is still expensive, but as more as I have, as more as I produce as more as I consume, the price will also go down. So, but it's pushing in both directions. Products are there, applications are there, and now the industry comes up and says, okay, I have hydrogen, who can buy it, who needs it, what purpose are you needing it for?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We had a hydrogen workshop on essentially building a consortium and a roadmap. This was in Adipec in UAE back in November. And just coming back to that tangible strategy or blueprint, I would say the consensus in the room was, you know, we've made these announcements, we have these targets, but that next step is, okay, what's the actual tangible roadmap ahead, so everyone can kind of rally around that in the UAE. So it seems like there's still some steps to getting that out there, but definitely there's a lot of opportunity. Just talking about the UAE, of course, you'd mentioned, you know, COP's coming to the Middle East with Egypt, but also COP28 is in the UAE. What do you see as the biggest competitive advantages for the UAE in the energy transition right now? You know, as well, they're one of the only, you know, oil producing nations in this country or region that have announced net zero targets for 2050. Do you see that they have essentially the tools that are needed in the toolbox in order to meet those targets?
Yeah, I believe, I mean, that's my personal opinion, but I think I can share this with many, let's say, industry leaders here. The UAE, the commitment of the government, of the leaders of the UAE, as well as in Saudi Arabia and other parts here in the Middle East, I think the commitment to the net zero, let's say, approach is key to success. If the country, the leaders of the country are believing in their strategies and really living their strategies or trying to get to the result of the strategies, I think nothing else is more important than having this in place. And knowing many people here in the UAE in this industry, the commitment, I think, is fully available. The government is committed to it. There's funding in place to make it happen, and it's just now, where can it be applied? Where does it make sense today? What do we have to do long term to be a part of this strategy? So I think this is a big advantage.
Where do you see the role of further partnerships and collaboration playing in this? You know, this is a massive challenge. This is a massive task. It's probably going to take all stakeholders in order to hit these targets. Is that going to be the key enabler, essentially, considering the UAE as a hub in a sense?
I mean, the UAE or the GCC countries here in the Middle East, I think the business model, which started 50 years ago or even longer, is built on partnerships, right? So you talk about any of the existing local families, big local families, small local families, they built their kind of business in partnerships. And I think it comes more and more obvious that even these partnerships today are important. There are many projects on a very, very low level or lower scale, I would say, where it can only work with partnerships. There's some super mega projects, which obviously international players have a share of it. But talking about ADNOC, having the in-country value in place, it all leads to partnerships.
Just touching on the technology side again, what do you see as the biggest innovations being made at the moment in terms of decarbonizing heavy industries, in a sense, you know, microgrids as well, coming from your perspective in your company? What do you see as the most viable options and the one that's making the most impact?
Yeah, I mean, solar is a big part of energy production, right? But solar is more or less useless, I would say, to be very blunt, if you cannot connect it to a user, an application which is actually in need of energy. So with, you just mentioned about microgrid, with having the microgrid control and having storage facilities in terms of, okay, today it's a battery, tomorrow it might be it may be hydrogen because it's solar to or through electrolyzer into hydrogen. So it becomes fashionable. It also becomes easy to transport without having big investment in energy transition, right? So to have an energy highway, it costs a lot of money. What is the benefit for it? So as we talked about partnerships here, urbanization is a part of this development, I believe. that smaller parts where energy is required can be done locally. You don't have to connect it to big major grids, right? Or you can actually flatten out the energy production for areas where you don't need the high demand of energy. So solar is a part of it, but key to all of it, hydrogen, battery, whatsoever, is the controller here. And I think the whole electrification, digitalization of buildings, of smart grids, talking to each other, even an e-vehicle, can be used as a backup power if needed in the night. No electricity, your vehicle is charged, it's electricity, right? So here the connectivity, and now it comes together. The application in terms of energy source, it doesn't matter how it comes from, then the storage, then the consumer itself or parts of the consumers. Once this starts communication, it gets more efficient, it gets cheaper. I think this is what it comes into place right now.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the digitalization aspect and digital transformation of the sector. Do you think that it is currently on track for what needs to be done, or do you think that there's still a long road ahead in terms of digitalizing a lot of these organizations and infrastructure?
I think, again, the equipment is mostly available today, but now the acceptance of the end user, because now it's not suddenly a government anymore, it's an end user, it's a consumer. Take a high-rise building today, how many electrical components are in place and how many of them are interconnected? There are hardly any of them interconnected. If it's an elevator, it's a cooling system, it's the lighting whatsoever, they're all working independently, and this needs to be somehow connected. And then it can be also measured, and what you measure, you can actually then also make actions on how to make it more efficient. Right? So I think the part of equipment which can be digitalized is available, but now the acceptance to communicate, also to allow things to talk to each other on the same level, so you have the all same language and so on. I think this is still to come.
Just one aspect on that too, as we're talking about new technologies, this push towards energy transition. Of course, it's happening at a rapid pace. I just wanted to touch on the talent that's required in order to essentially facilitate this. How do you see, or in terms of drawing in human capital, as well as the younger generation being a part of the energy sector, which from the oil and gas side may have had different perspectives in the past? How do you see that evolving in terms of this massive transformation that's taking place at the moment?
I think this is one of the key challenges in the moment. The reskilling of existing, let's say, like employees, people working on this equipment. As more equipment needs to talk to each other, there are much more skills required than just a typical mechanic, a typical electrician, whatsoever, right? As a plan of Al-Masood, of our company also, we are looking into reskilling as a kind of a future-proofing of the company, right? We know that oil and gas will not disappear. However, the hydrogen production, the whole hydrogen supply chain will be parallel. So there are typical oil and gas business, I would say, occupations. However, on the other side, you have hydrogen, you have a completely different materials. It's a different element, I would say. That has to come, and that has to come fairly quickly. Come back to digitalization, it's another thing. So suddenly things were physically connected via cables today. There's a lot of it going to clouds, through Wi-Fi connections, whatever it is. And this is a new skill which is required and which needs to come now more or less throughout the supply chain.
Just going back to end users, but also kind of from a society point of view, are you starting to see more awareness of this transition and the need to transition, given the climate change challenge amongst society in general? Are you seeing that on the ground, an uptake in a sense?
Yeah. Again, my own opinion is here, then, and also what I can see now is that especially companies within the region here now are seeing that the whole net zero approach, or the carbon neutral or carbon reduction, is affecting also their business, right? International companies are already looking at local partners which are participating in this drive, I would say. Go back to Europe 3 months or 4 months ago. Part of your financial credit rating is how you create your carbon footprint, how you treat your carbon footprint. What do you do against it? What are your suppliers participating? What you produce while operation, and what do you deliver to clients? So I think that goes very quick right now, and I believe that's a very important point, that the local industry, the local business world understands that being carbon neutral or going towards carbon neutral, I mean, it's not a step overnight, right? It's a journey, I would say. But going that way is a benefit for the company. It's a social aspect, right? If I'm participating in making it happen, I'm a part of the community. On the other hand, when then financial benefit come in place, or let's say I can avoid disadvantages by a not so good credit rating as a company, I physically save money, which is already a benefit, a motivation, I would say. On the private side, I can say, again, lower level projects, but there are many, I would say, people are right now looking into their own homes in terms of upgrading to solar. If you look at the building codes in Dubai as example, where solar or sustainable energy is a part of every new building that is, let's say, going for approvals. I think this is also, nobody talks about it, but it's a slow and steady step to participate for the normal people, I would say, who consume electricity for charging, for fridge, for living, for whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's the industry as well as the end consumer of let's say energy who are now motivated and taking part in this journey.
Just on that climate footprint aspect, where do you see the role of carbon pricing coming into play here in the region? Do you think that will eventually have to accelerate and take off?
Like I said, Europe is already a part of it, or
yeah,
in Europe it's a part, and there are many international companies operating in the Middle East. I believe it's just a matter of time when the European or even the American part, the Western world, I would say, reflects to the Middle East, and then it's a part of it, right? It's not a matter of do I want this or not. You are a part. Right?
And just it seems that 15, 20 minutes goes by pretty fast. So just as a wrap up kind of question, we've touched on, as you mentioned many times, companies now looking at their sustainability strategies moving forward. What would be your top recommendations, in that process for those companies when they start to lay out and go on this journey at the moment?
Yeah, here important, and I put myself in this group. It's very important to get consultancy. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot, but you need a direction and you need a target where you aim for. We have started with individual projects within the company. We changed our printing system to double pages. We reduce our printing. We have converted to full LED. So every light bulb in the building is LED. Next part will be solar. So we kind of invested a lot of time in this whole thing, but there are many companies out there which can support this on a much quicker way and also in a much more cost-effective way, I'd say. If companies are looking into it, get a consultant, then let them tell you what would make sense for you, and then get it done.
Well, thank you very much, Rosso. I appreciate your time today. And for all those joining, please feel free to follow Rosso and, of course, Al-Masoud across social media for further insights and a lot of the initiatives that the company, of course, has been implementing. And, of course, follow us at Gulf Intelligence on LinkedIn and Twitter, where this interview will be posted on and uploaded, and, of course, many other pieces of content as well. But thank you very much again, Rosso, for joining today. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.